yellow at this time of year?
I can't wear yellow, it turns me yellow.
You know, there's a time in the year when you switch from light-colored jackets to dark-colored jackets. You know, it's fashion. Well, the church isn't much different. And the church has gone through a lot of fashion changes over the years. This is called a chasuble. Originally, that was just a Roman garment. It had nothing to do with Holy Eucharist. It was just a Roman garment. In fact, it wasn't this full. And if you look at the Eastern Church today, you'll see the Roman garment as it used to be. A chasuble used to come to about here in front, from neck to about your solar plexus. And then it was cut away, and in the back it came to the ankle. And that's the chasuble in the Eastern Church today. In the Western Church, it became much more elaborate and bigger. Now you got to remember that the English Church started out as an Eastern communion. In the early part of the church, there was one color. And it was fancy. It was festive. The more gold it had, the better. The gold was usually on white. And that vestment was used pretty much throughout the year. Because each Sunday in the Eastern Church is a little Easter. And so the festive colors were worn throughout the year. In England, that became the practice. But Celtic people never stick with one color. So they branched out and they gathered more colors from nature into their worship setting. That moved and shifted from starting around the 6th century into about the 15th century. By the 15th century, the English usage had a lot of color in it, but not what you would expect. One of the remarkable things was that in the English usage, the primary color was festive. It was the golds and whites, the bright whites, covered in layers of gold braid and things like that. And it was worn primarily at the Feast of the Incarnation. That's unique to the English Church. The Incarnation, that is Christmas, was the primary feast, not Easter. It was the fact that God sent His only Son that was to be celebrated. And then Easter became a secondary celebration to Christmas in the English Church. And so it also had these festive colors to them. By the middle of the 15th century, the church had a whole array of colors. If you went through the church year, this is what you would see. The primary color of the first part of the church year, that is Advent, were blues. Now, blues incorporated anything from azure through Marian blue through purple. Those were all considered blue. And that blue was a royal color. And it aimed at the Incarnation, the Feast of the Incarnation. Now, on occasion, they began to use a rose color. And by the middle of the 15th century, the rose color in England, when it was used during the octave of the Immaculate Conception of the Blessed Virgin Mary in Advent. So it was considered a Marian color. Now, not everybody used it, but when it was used, that's when it was used. It was used during a festive octave of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And it was also used occasionally on other feasts of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Blue was the first color. The festive color, the golds on whites and the bright whites, came out for the Incarnation and for the celebration of the resurrection, Easter. Red had a twofold use. Red was used during the Passion Tide, which at that time went from the Sunday before Palm Sunday through Holy Week and up to Easter Eve. Red was used then. Red was also used for the ordinary time. That is, those Sundays between Trinity and Advent. The color was red. Green was used for matrons, for saints who were married women. Their color was green. You can guess what?
Oh, did you?
Because they bore children. They grew things. But green was not used for the ordinary days. Yellow was used for the feasts of confessors. A plain, well, confessors like Kentigern or Columba or Patrick, they would be in yellow. For virgins, they would be in a plain and yet bright white. For martyrs, you used red. For the season between Ash Wednesday and the Sunday before Holy Week, before Palm Sunday, the color was white. Now, this was not the bright white. This was an off-white, an unbleached piece of fabric. No color at all. Purple was not a penitential color. Purple, or blue, was a royal color. So for Lent, what we call Lent, it was unbleached. There was no color to it at all. In Lancaster, in the cathedral in Lancaster, they had about 13 different colors that were used at different times in the year. The Roman use brought us down to 4 colors and misused the colors that they had. White became the color of confessors, as well as virgins and other saints who weren't martyred, instead of yellow. Yellow went out the window. Green became ordinary time instead of red. Blue became purple only, and it became a color of penance. So the Roman use took away all the color of the English use and brought it down to the 4 colors that we're accustomed to now. The evangelical, the Puritan end of the Church of England after the Reformation took away all color and left everything plain and uncolored. That's kind of a fashion run for the history of liturgical colors and garments. So our tradition within the English use is to use many colors. They even had a piebald, which was just a mix of colors.
Oh, that would be the best.
So,
Bill has a question.
At the time of Jesus and throughout most of the Arab world and the Semitic world, there were 4 colors that were used primarily. 3 by women and 1 by all people, white being the color of death,
yes.
because white was for funeral shrouds. And so Jesus was wrapped in white in the tomb.
The shroud was
Women, young women, unmarried women, virgins, wore blue, which is one of the reasons that we associate Mary with the color blue. Older women who had become married or had gone into slavery, in other words, were under authority, wore black, as they still do today in the Arab world. Also, if a woman wore black, it meant that the transfer of that authority was available. So if you wanted to buy somebody's wife, you could do that. And there are instances in the Bible where wives have been sold and this sort of thing. That was black. Truth in advertising, okay? And then the third color that was used was purple, which was used for post-menopausal women, and it told the potential buyers that this was not going to be a viable candidate. So that's...
Yep.
Goodness.
So, anyway, that's kind of a history of colors in the life of the church.
So Harry talked a lot about history, and I just want to remind you, we'll go back over some of this again, about how we currently use colors as we go through the year, right? So white is the color of light, it's the color of resurrection, it's the color of remembering the Lord. So we use white on Christmas and Easter primarily, but other feasts of the Lord as well. So as we get to the end of ordinary time and we celebrate the feast of Christ the King, we use white vestments. Okay, so that's white in our current definitions today. Let me switch to green for just a second. So green, we already talked about this, but green is a sense of life, a sense of growing, and so we use green primarily at 2 times of the year. The first is during Epiphany time. We use green as a time to think about Jesus' early life. But we also use green for the longest period of time during the calendar year, which we call ordinary time. That's what Harry and I refer to it as. Ordinary time starts after Trinity, and it's the time that goes from the Trinity Sunday all the way through until we hit Advent, pretty much. We call that ordinary time because during the ordinary time we're celebrating the public ministry of Jesus. And if you look at the readings that we do during that time, it's all about Jesus' teaching, his ministries to people, his miracles that he did, and it's how we grow in the life of Jesus, right? So we're growing to understand the life of Jesus. That's what green is about, and we use that for the longest period of time. That's why you've seen it for the last, I don't know, we're on the 24th,
Week.
24th Sunday of that time, so there you go. Red, as Harry indicated, has really two senses for me personally. One is we use it as a sense of the Holy Spirit, sense of power, a sense of the power of the Holy Spirit coming upon us. So we wear red on Pentecost. That's a day that we wear red. But we also wear red during the time of the Passion, when Jesus, we now wear it on Palm Sunday usually. And we might wear it during the Easter week, before Easter, the last week of Lent. It also is a thought of blood, right? Because blood is red. So we think about blood when we think about celebrating saints who were martyrs, people that were killed for their faith. So that's another reason why we might use red as well. So red has a couple different meanings. And then we use purple, this color, now. Historically, it's been used during Advent and Lent. And so purple has the sense of, well, it's actually a royal color, which is kind of an interesting thing. But
Why it wasn't used in Lent.
yeah, but we have come to think of it as a penitential sense, okay? Penance, sacrifice, and preparation. So we wear purple during Lent to try to purify our souls as we get ready for the Easter celebration, okay? Now the reason that I kind of decided that we wanted to do this, it has to do with blue. So this happens to be Michael's blue stole, and you don't see this that much. In fact, blue has become kind of it has an interesting point of argument about blue. Since about the 1980s in the Episcopal Church, blue has been encouraged during the season of Advent. And the reason for that are some of the things that Harry talked about. One, blue is a color of Mary, and so Mary we think of as preparation time for the birth of Jesus. We also think about it as an incarnational thing. Blue is an incarnational thing, color. And interestingly enough, those of you who were here with us last Sunday remember that that Bill talked about, I think it was Bill, talked about blue being a color that St. Francis wore, right? Blue, another color blue. So one of the reasons why I wanted to do this discussion about color today is that when I first got here on one of the first Sundays, this congregation gave me some money towards vestments. And one of the things I decided to do was to buy blue-colored vestments because I wanted to create this sense during Advent that blue was a sense of preparation, that we're looking forward, that we're excited to the birth of Jesus, the Incarnation, Christmas. And so I've ordered some blue vestments with the money that you gave me. And there's another person that's contributed some money to that. So in Advent, when we get to that point where you're going to see some blue on the altar, I want you to think about it in a little different way. A sense of preparation, a sense of, maybe you want to think of Mary and Mary's commitment, what she gave to do this. Or maybe you want to think of it as anticipating Jesus, the birth of Jesus, and that might be why we would wear blue as well. Does that make some sense to you all? So if you see some blue vestments on the altar during Advent, it's for that reason that we're doing it. The particular blue that I chose has a lot of white on it, but it has blue striping on it, and so you'll be seeing blue on the altar at that time. Now, a couple more things I wanted to mention about color. In some churches, we have color not only as vestments that you see, and also on what we call the burse and the veil, the things that cover the chalice on the altar, right? Mm-hmm. And so we combine those colors to try and encourage us to remember what it is we're trying to celebrate during that particular point in time. But in some churches, they've actually got those colors in other places in the church. In this particular church, we have banners that are throughout the church. And the banners that are behind the altar are the ones that try and remind us of what the color of that season is. But there's other places where we can put that color too. So some churches have frontispieces on the altar. They put that color on the front of the altar. We don't choose to do that because we have such a beautiful wooden altar that also has a cross on it. But for those of you who noticed in the early service, or who might notice in the second service, we decided to add just a little bit of frontispiece on the altar, just this deep, and you might see it, it's made of lace. We just added it this past week. And the reason is because I happen to like color. So you get to like color too. And you might see us trying to add, as we go through time during my ministry here, to add color. Another place that we're going to try and add color if we can is on the pulpit and lectern hangings. Okay? You can put those same colors on the pulpit and lectern. The only meaning they have is to remind us of why we're here and what we're trying to celebrate during this period of time. It doesn't have any special meaning. It's just meant for me to add color and to help us remember. So the problem that we have is some of the materials that we have don't particularly fit really well in the altar space that we have. But I happen to know someone who's interested in trying to make a difference in that space. So we'll see if that happens. That's my wife I'm talking about. We'll see we'll see if she's able to make some changes. So if you see some new colors coming onto the altar that match what you see in the vestments and that match what you see in the burse and the veil, the two things that sit on top of the chalice, it all has to do with my wish to encourage us to think about that color and to celebrate the seasons that we're into. So that would be why we would do that. I have a couple other things that I want to mention that you might see as changes in the near future about our services. One of the things that I feel pretty strongly about is I would like, especially for visitors who come to visit with us, that they feel comfortable in the service time. And one way that I would like to see us to do that is to have a bulletin that describes everything that happens in the service. So that it's not a matter of fumbling. This is my terminology, it's not your terminology. Fumbling through books to try and find out where we are in the book. Or fumbling with whether I'm supposed to have the Book of Common Prayer or the hymnal. So my desire would be that we change the bulletin that we use in our services such that it's more complete. So that it lists all the various pieces of the service that we go through. It probably will list the Gloria. It will probably list the creed that we say in the bulletin, so that people don't have to search for where to find it when they go to do that. And primarily I'm doing that for the people that would come and visit with us, so that they feel comfortable in the service and know exactly where we are at all times. So if you soon see a new bulletin that's more complete than what we've used here in the past, I would just ask you to try it. Just try it and see how it feels to you. And I'm sure that some of you will have feedback. Some of you may not like it, and that's okay. It's okay. You don't have to like everything that I do. It's okay. But I'm hopeful that some of you will understand that my point in trying to bring it here is to try to encourage new people to come and be comfortable in our place. Okay? So there's some work that's being done to try and put a bulletin together. Now some of you may decide it's too big, too thick, too much. And if that's the case, that's okay. We'll work our way through that as we go through time. Yes, Nancy?
The only thing I ask, because I love those bulletins, because I think we all have to remember that it's an accessibility issue to make our church more accessible to whomever God brings to our door. And if we're ready, God will bring them. But thinking about our current congregation and the many of us that have aging eyes, I just hope that the typeface is not too small.
Okay.
Other
So,
than that, that's my only
I hear what you're saying, and I'll try and do my best.
Yeah.
But be patient as we go. When you try something, it
Oh,
doesn't always
sure.
work the first day.
Oh, absolutely.
So it might take a few different changes to go through. So I'd just ask you to do that. There's one last thing I want to mention about our services that I would like to initiate, and I will do this soon. One of the things I would like to do is offer prayers of healing for people if they would like this. This is just my own personal sense. And in places where I've been in the past, we've done that during the communion time. So I haven't worked this out quite yet with Martha and Michael and Harry and myself, but it's likely that you may very soon see us offering a time for an individual to have some healing prayers, whatever they are. Whatever, if you want to say what you want to have healing prayers for, that's fine. If you just want to come to a person and say, just offer a prayer for me for healing, that's okay too. So I'm not sure how we'll work on this, but it will probably have on one side, I'm thinking of the right side as you face the altar, because it's kind of an open space right now, that maybe we'll put a chair there and one of the four of us will go to that space, and when you come up for communion, or when you come up for communion you'd like to stop there and just ask one of us for a particular prayer for healing, that would be what that would be for. Not required, all voluntary, just another opportunity for us to pray with you about your individual needs. And it's something that I feel. There may actually become a time when it's not actually done by a clergy person, but maybe done by lay people. And that's good too, because we can pray for each other. And some people have the gift of healing prayer, even maybe more so than the clergy people do. So I just want you to know that those are a couple of the things that I've been thinking about. I hope it doesn't scare you when I talk about a couple minor changes. I don't think you'll feel like they're big changes, but as we go through time, maybe you'll feel some of this, some experience of this. Okay? So I'm actually going to stop right there and ask if there's any questions about some of the things that Harry and I have discussed. Anything? Martha, maybe it's not a question, maybe it's an answer.
No, just an observation. And, I know that I am so for the making the worship aid more complete.
Yes.
Because, the things we do, the standing up, the sitting down, the kneeling, it's, I realize that how much tension that creates sometimes for new people. So, when it's clarified by worship aid, I think that's in the flow of the service really is very helpful. But sometimes the conversation in congregations is, gee, that's a lot of paper, or gee, we've invested in the prayer book. So I think that maybe, what this move tells me is that, we are so ready to make an investment in the welcoming of strangers and in hospitality that, we can tell you about the prayer book as we go along, but for day one, and whatever day one happens to be for you, we're going to be open and clear about who we are. So I just wanted to tell you that I like that idea.
Oh, thank you. So we'll just try it, see how it works. If it doesn't work, we stop it. That's how things go for us. Yes, Harry.
St. John's, where I used to be rector, went to this kind of bulletin a long time ago. And they are still doing it. One of the neat things about it is you begin to look at the possibilities of expanding, your accessibility to not only the Anglo people of the area, but also Hispanic people of the area. That could be done in Spanish as well.
Yes.
So that it would be available to anybody who came in. So I like the idea.
Nancy?
The other thing that just occurred to me as Harry was speaking, and I thought, well, Sunday bulletins we take home, which means here is a mini version of what's in the prayer book that now gets taken out of the door by our visitor. An opportunity to read and reflect it again and look, and maybe there was something that caught somebody's eye or ear as they went through the service, and there it is, it's in their hands. That's a really gift for God to use as people who have visited
Thank you.
go away from this.
Mary?
I've seen bulletins with some of the major prayers in them on 8.5 by 11 paper. So that might make it easier.
We're actually, the drafts that we're looking at would actually use 11 by 17.
Wow,
Yeah.
great.
And so then you fold it, okay? So you would be using really big paper, but folding it so that it would appear to you as if it were a booklet kind of a thing, not exactly, but each page would be 8.5 by 11.
It would also allow you to use a larger font.
I'm hoping that that's the case, but we'll have to see how all that
Yes.
works.
Yeah,
We'll have to see how all that
I've
works.
gone to parishes where the whole service is in the bulletin, the whole complete service.
Yeah.
And you don't, yeah.
No problem.
By the way, we talk about visitors, and one thing I might actually encourage you, if there is a visitor there, if someone would be willing to sit with a visitor, at least during this current time, and kind of be willing to say, oh, I opened the book for you, here's where we are in the book today, you know, and that's a really nice thing to do for people, to sit with them during the service if they're willing to do that. So I should mention one other thing, and then we need to do the drawing. Because I was at convention and I was with a lot of people from this church at the convention, we got into a little bit of a discussion about the fact that we actually have projection materials that are in this church. And I understand that those projection materials were used during the time that Kathleen was the rector at this church. And so I just want you to know that another thing, it hasn't been decided, nothing's happened, and nobody's done anything, so you can talk to me about it. Another thing that I'm just thinking about is whether or not we should go back and start using the projection material to help people with what's going on in the service. And that you might do that because different people learn and experience life in different ways. Some people learn from listening, some people learn from reading, some people like both, some people like pictures. I'm not sure what we're going to do about that, but I just don't want to surprise you to let you know that I'm thinking about it. So, you know, as I try and think about how we together can worship God and be excited about that experience, I just want you to know that that's something I'm thinking about too. So Mary, let's do thank you for listening to all my talk and Harry's talk and just some thoughts that we're having about how the worship service works here.